It was a rainy evening, and the wet weather had left its mark on a man who walked into a fancy hotel lobby. His clothes were damp from the rain, and he wore a simple hoodie, nothing too fancy. He approached the front desk quietly, but the hotel manager, dressed sharply in a suit, immediately looked at him with a sneer. "We don't serve people like you here," the manager said loudly. Everyone in the lobby heard him. The guests in the lobby stopped talking and looked in his direction. But little did they know what happened next would change how they thought about kindness and how appearances can be deceiving. The man in the hoodie was none other than Keanu Reeves, a famous actor known for his kindness. He stepped up to the desk and asked politely for a room. His voice was calm and gentle, but the manager barely looked up at him. Without checking to see if there were any rooms available, the manager quickly dismissed him. "We're fully booked," the manager said in a sharp tone, not bothering to check the computer or even try to help. Keanu, however, wasn't quick to leave. He politely asked, "Are you sure? Even a small room would do." The manager, growing annoyed, answered loudly, "I said we're booked. Go somewhere else. Try a place more suitable for you." The manager's voice was full of disdain, and it was loud enough for the other guests to hear. Some of them turned their heads and whispered to each other. Keanu didn't argue. Instead, he simply stood there for a moment, his face calm and unreadable. He looked around at the luxurious lobby with its gleaming chandeliers, polished marble floors, and well-dressed guests. Then he smiled softly and nodded. "All right," he said. "Thank you for your time." He turned to leave, but just as he was walking toward the door, a young bellhop who had been quietly watching the scene stepped forward. "Sir, wait," the bellhop called out hesitantly. The manager shot the bellhop a glare, warning him not to get involved, but the bellhop ignored him. "Let me check the system. Maybe we can find something," the bellhop said. The manager scoffed and said, "Don't waste your time. He doesn't look like someone who can afford even our smallest room." The bellhop hesitated, torn between doing what was right and following the manager's orders. But Keanu noticed the young man's hesitation and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's all right," Keanu said kindly. "Thank you for your kindness." As Keanu headed for the door, the manager muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "People like him shouldn't even bother coming to places like this." The lobby fell silent, and the guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some seemed to feel sorry for Keanu, while others just watched, unsure of what was happening. Keanu stopped at the door and turned back to face the manager. "You know, it's not always about how people look," he said calmly. "Sometimes it's about what's underneath." His words hung in the air, leaving everyone wondering what he meant. But just as the lobby began to return to its usual quiet hum, something unexpected happened. Less than 5 minutes later, the glass doors of the hotel swung open again. Keanu Reeves stepped back into the lobby, but this time he was not alone. Two sharply dressed people walked in behind him, both carrying important-looking documents and exuding an air of authority. They walked confidently across the lobby, and their polished shoes made soft tapping sounds on the marble floor. The manager, who had been sitting at the desk, looked up in irritation. "I thought I told you," he started, but his words died in his throat when he saw the serious faces of Keanu's companions. The taller man of the two stepped forward. "Are you the manager of this hotel?" he asked in a calm but firm voice. The manager blinked, suddenly unsure of himself. "Yes," he answered, though his voice was lacking the confidence it had just moments ago. The taller man nodded. "Good. I think it's time we have a conversation about how you treat your guests." He turned toward Keanu. "This gentleman here," he said, "is someone of significant importance. Your behavior toward him has been noticed." The lobby went silent again. The manager's face turned pale as he tried to understand what was happening. He glanced at Keanu, who now stood with an air of quiet authority. The same man he had dismissed earlier, dressed in a simple hoodie, now seemed to carry a weight of importance that was impossible to ignore. The second person, a woman, stepped forward and spoke. "This man," she said, her voice firm but calm, "is the owner of this hotel chain." The words hit like a bombshell. The guests in the lobby gasped, and some even stood up in shock. The man they had just seen being dismissed so rudely was, in fact, the owner of the very hotel they were staying in. The manager's face turned bright red, and his hands started shaking. I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought—" Keanu raised a hand, silencing him. "There was no mistake," Keanu said softly, his voice steady. "You made a judgment based on how I looked. You assumed I wasn't worthy of respect." The lobby was still, and all eyes were on the manager, who could no longer defend himself. The bellhop, who had tried to help Keanu earlier, stood at the back watching the scene unfold. He had a small smile on his face, clearly proud that he had done the right thing. Keanu noticed and turned to him. "Thank you for your kindness earlier," he said. "It takes courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's not easy." The bellhop, whose name was Ethan, nodded, still stunned by the turn of events. He had no idea how much his small act of kindness would change everything. Keanu then turned back to the manager, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Your actions don't just reflect on you," Keanu said. "They reflect on the entire hotel and the people who work here. This is not how guests should ever be treated." The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had no way to defend his actions. Keanu wasn't finished yet. He gestured to his companions. "I think it's time we make some changes around here," he said. "This hotel should be a place where people feel welcome, no matter what they wear or where they come from." Turning to Ethan, the young bellhop, Keanu smiled and asked, "What's your name?" "Ethan," the bellhop replied. "Well, Ethan," Keanu said, "you've shown today that kindness and respect matter more than anything. I'll be speaking with HR about giving you a promotion." The guests in the lobby were now watching in amazement. Some nodded approvingly, others were still in shock. But all of them knew that they had witnessed something extraordinary. As for the manager, his face was as red as a tomato. He had learned a hard lesson that day about judgment, kindness, and respect. Lessons that Keanu had shown, not through anger or force but through quiet strength and dignity. Keanu's gaze stayed on the manager, steady and unshaken. His eyes didn't leave the man as he continued speaking, his voice calm and strong. "Let me explain what we just saw," Keanu said. "Judging people by how they look or by what you assume about them is wrong. This hotel or any place shouldn't be like that." The manager felt nervous and tried to explain himself. I was just trying to," he stammered, his voice unsure. But Keanu raised his hand to stop him. "This isn't about making excuses," Keanu said, his tone firm. "It's about making real changes. If you want to keep your job, you have to treat everyone with respect no matter what. No exceptions." The people in the lobby could feel the tension in the air. They looked at each other, unsure of what was happening. Even the staff didn't know what to expect. But as Keanu's voice softened, a calmness spread through the room. "This isn't just about pointing out mistakes," Keanu said. "It's about creating a place where everyone, guests, workers, and even people just passing through, feel important and valued." Keanu turned his head to look at the workers standing nearby. "Each of you has the power to make someone's day better. A smile, a kind word, a little extra effort. It doesn't take much, but it can change everything. It makes a big difference." The guests who had been watching quietly suddenly started to clap. Keanu's words had made an impact. They could feel the sincerity in his voice and it touched their hearts. Even the hotel manager seemed to understand what Keanu was saying. The manager nodded slowly, taking in what Keanu had said. But Keanu wasn't finished. He walked over to the front desk where the list of reservations was sitting. "Cancel my reservation," Keanu said, looking down at the clipboard. "And make sure the next available room goes to someone who really needs it." The manager blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice confused. Keanu smiled gently. "There are people out there who don't have a place to stay tonight. Let's make this hotel a place where they're welcome. We can help." The room burst into applause. Keanu's simple request had inspired everyone in the room. Guests who had been silent until now started offering to help. One woman stood up and said, "If this hotel can help people in need, I want to help too. Count me in." Others followed her, and soon many people were stepping forward to contribute. Keanu had started something much bigger than just standing up for kindness. His words had sparked a movement of generosity. As the applause quieted down, Keanu turned to Ethan, the young bellhop who had been quietly watching everything. "Ethan, you'll be in charge of making sure the rooms go to the people who need them most," Keanu said, his voice warm. "You've already shown you have the heart for it." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice shaking. "I won't let you down." Keanu smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "I know you won't." The changes at the hotel had only just begun, but already the impact of that evening was huge. Guests who had been quietly watching were now inspired. The hotel staff felt a new sense of purpose. They were motivated to do better. Even the manager, who had been embarrassed by his behavior, promised to work harder. He had learned a valuable lesson. As Keanu prepared to leave, someone in the crowd called out, "You've done more than change this hotel. You've changed lives." Keanu paused and turned to look back with a small smile. "That's all that matters," he replied quietly. The story of what had happened in the hotel spread quickly. People posted pictures and videos on social media, sharing the story of how Keanu had stood up for kindness and fairness. Soon, the hashtags #KeanuKindness and #HotelTransformation were trending all over the internet. In just a few hours, reporters and curious onlookers came to the hotel to learn more about what had happened. The hotel staff, now filled with energy and inspiration, worked together to keep the positive changes going. Ethan, who had started as a bellhop, was now leading the effort. He began organizing a list of shelters and families who could benefit from the available rooms. Guests who were inspired by Keanu's actions continued to offer donations and suggestions for how the hotel could continue helping those in need. The hotel manager, still feeling the weight of his earlier actions, approached Keanu once again. His voice was soft and hesitant. "Mr. Reeves, I want to apologize for what I did. I made assumptions about people and I realize now how wrong I was," he said, his face showing real regret. Keanu looked at him, his expression kind but firm. "It's not just about apologizing," Keanu said. "It's about learning and changing. Mistakes are only a problem if you don't try to grow from them." The manager nodded earnestly. "I understand. I will do better. I promise I'll make this hotel a better place for everyone." Keanu gave him a small nod. "Good. Change starts with taking responsibility." Meanwhile, in the lobby, a woman with 2 young children approached Keanu, holding a room key. Her face was wet with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know where we were going to stay tonight. You've given us a chance to rest, to breathe." Keanu knelt down to the children's level, his eyes soft and kind. "You're welcome," he said gently. "You deserve to feel safe. Take care of each other." The children smiled shyly, their faces lighting up with happiness. The moment was simple, yet it was deeply moving. It was a quiet reminder of the power of kindness and compassion. As more people thanked Keanu, the energy in the lobby became more positive. Guests who had been quiet and indifferent before were now actively joining in the movement of kindness. An elderly man, who had been sitting alone in the corner, walked up to the front desk with a check in his hand. "This hotel has become something more than just a place to stay," he said. "I want to help make sure it stays that way." His offer inspired others to contribute. Soon, the hotel had not only a list of people to help but also the money and resources to do so. Ethan, though overwhelmed, worked hard to organize everything. He coordinated with the efficiency of someone much older than him. Keanu stood off to the side, watching it all unfold. He couldn't help but smile as he saw how much his actions had inspired everyone. He knew that the change happening at the hotel wasn't just about him. It was about showing people the impact they could have when they chose kindness. One of Keanu's friends came over to him. "It's incredible, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the busy lobby. "Look at all the good that's happening." Keanu nodded. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. Real change takes time and it takes commitment." As the evening went on, the crowd began to thin out, but the positive energy in the hotel stayed. The staff had a renewed sense of purpose, and the guests left with inspiring stories to share. The hotel had become a symbol of hope. Before leaving, Keanu walked over to Ethan one last time. "You've got this," he said, patting him on the shoulder. "Keep leading with your heart." Ethan smiled, his confidence growing. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I won't forget this." Keanu nodded. "Neither will I." As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the rain had stopped. The city lights sparkled in the puddles on the ground. Keanu walked away, leaving behind more than just a transformed hotel. He left behind a legacy of kindness, and a lesson that no one in the lobby would ever forget. The story of Keanu's actions didn't end that night. Over the following days, the story went viral. It spread across social media, news outlets, and even international platforms. People from all walks of life were inspired by the humility and compassion of a man who, despite his fame and fortune, chose to lead by example. The hotel, once just another luxury establishment, gained a new reputation. It became known as a place where kindness and compassion thrived. The hotel launched a new program called Rooms of Hope. Every month, a percentage of rooms were set aside to provide shelter for people in need. Families going through tough times, people recovering from tragedies, and those seeking a fresh start were all welcome. Ethan, now promoted to a managerial role, led the Rooms of Hope program with passion. The young man who had once been just a bellhop became a symbol of how small acts of kindness could lead to significant change. Guests who stayed at the hotel were greeted with warmth and kindness. The staff treated everyone with respect, and even the hotel manager, who had once made mistakes, worked hard to ensure that every guest felt valued. His transformation proved that change, no matter how difficult, was always possible. As the weeks passed, letters started pouring into the hotel. Families wrote to share how the Rooms of Hope program had given them a fresh start. One letter came from a single mother who had almost lost everything. She wrote about how the hotel's kindness helped her find a job and create stability for her children. Another letter came from an elderly couple who had been stranded after a natural disaster. They shared how the hotel staff had treated them with dignity and care during one of the hardest times in their lives. Keanu read each letter with a quiet pride. This was why he had stepped in that night, not for fame or recognition, but to create a ripple effect of positivity and change. One evening, Ethan found Keanu sitting in the lobby, watching the activity around him. He smiled and held out one of the letters. "Mr. Reeves," Ethan said, "you need to see this one." Keanu took the letter and read it. It was from a young boy whose family had been helped by the hotel. The boy wrote about how he dreamed of one day working at a place like this, where kindness and hope were more important than money. The letter ended with, "Because of you, I believe the world can be good again." Keanu smiled, folding the letter carefully. "That," he said softly, "is what it's all about." As Keanu left the hotel that night, he paused outside. The city was alive with lights and sounds, but for a moment, everything felt still. He looked up at the hotel building, now a beacon of hope and compassion, and nodded to himself. He knew this was just the beginning. The kindness he had shown in that lobby would continue to grow, not just at the hotel but in the hearts of everyone who heard the story. And as Keanu walked away into the night, the world seemed just a little bit brighter because of him. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.